to NESC for organizing this event. It's great in these discussions and all the perspectives. Those brilliant learning exercises for most of us. Also, congratulations to Simon for the report. Very good, enjoying the report. And I'd like to share some of the thoughts I've been encountering in the last 20 years dealing with sustainability at different companies. So currently I'm working for the company that makes like half of the aluminum cans for beverages in the world. In Europe we make 26 billion cans. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the products I've been involved in the last 20 years. I used to work for Ericsson and Vodafone many years ago. Then I moved to a company called Interface, which we made carpet tiles, and was a legendary company in terms of sustainability because we started many years ago. And now I'm moving to Bosch. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the three different aspects in terms of circularity. They are totally different in terms of circularity, though the issues encounter on those different companies. I remember, back 15, 20 years ago when we started talking about mobile phones and mobile phone recycling. So the issues around the durability, obviously, issues about the repairability is being discussed today. We started to say, sometime there will be more important what you have in the phone than the actual phone. And it didn't make sense somehow back then. We started thinking the phone will be like the computer. You wouldn't care which is the actual hardware. It would be about the software and the usability. And it's only really in the last 5-6 years we have really understood that how important is the applications and the way they organize, how the information is organized is more valuable than the actual hardware. We also talk about whether there is a matter of reuse, and back then we started to set up collection systems for old handsets like 15 years ago, and we would give even 5 euros, 10 euros for some of the handsets. These handsets would be cleaned up and they would be sold in Africa because they didn't have access to cheap phones back then. And that was the whole recycling about my mobile phone back then, was mostly selling them to Africa. There were companies really specialized on deleting the data, cleaning the phones and getting them into a sort of quality standard that could be traded in Dubai to be sold in Africa. Now there are phone brands that are cheaper and the whole cost of mobile phones in Africa have decreased dramatically. Obviously, the whole thing around easy to disassemble, and again today we discussed the issue around screws versus glues, etc. The issues around recovering of high value materials. And I'd like to tell you this story. I was incredibly frustrated for many years around chargers. Why did we have so many chargers? Remember back then, every brand had its own charger. Why? To protect their market. So Nokia wouldn't like a standardization of charger because it was a protective measure for them against the new upcoming brands. So in industries where there is so much change, they want to specialize and they want to differentiate themselves with anything they can. And the whole issue of chargers just was created because of that. So I think standardization is absolutely key, and there has to be strong regulation. Thank goodness there was a self-regulation with a bit of encouragement from the EU, thank goodness, otherwise the manufacturers wouldn't have standardized the chargers. And still, we have now iPhones versus the rest, versus mini USB, so it's not fully standardized. And then I moved to carpet tile. I mean, this is a company, we reduce carbon by 98%. We reduce water by 95%. We have recycled content of more than 60%. And it was about the concept of a carpet tile. Cutting carpet into squares, it would be easy to install, it would be easy to deinstall. Can you imagine the logistics of recycling a broadloom roll carpet? It would be a nightmare. And how do you transport, all of that. And then about separating the fiber and the backing, and then offering maintenance services. And then at some point, Interface, like 20 years ago, they started saying, okay, we're going to lease the carpet. And we miserably failed. And I think we need to be a little bit skeptical at some of this leasing. I think leasing occurs in a very few places. And asking for product manufacturers to just be naive, to jump into leasing is incredibly naive. And many of us, many of the whole environmental community, we think that leasing is a good thing. Only leasing is a good thing in a few, for example, in high-tech applications like a photocopier, for example, where you have likelihood to have failures, and so the technical service is key on that things, for example, they work. And also it's about being in the right part of the value chain in order to make the money from leasing. Who do you think is going to make money from renting a drill? Do you think it's Black & Decker, or do you think it's going to be B&Q or Leroy Merlin? You have to really be the retailer in order to make money from renting, from leasing, cannibalizing the product manufacturer. So product manufacturers cannot really do the leasing. It has to be either the retailers or third-party disruptors who do that in the first place. So some of the things we were doing in Interface, we recycling fishing nets from the Philippines, for example, and depolymerizing the nylon in a plant from our big supplier Aquafil and buying this nylon back, for example. So making carpet with recycled nylon from fishing nets, recovering the PVB, which is in the middle of the windscreen, and that is a waste of the glass recycling industry, and using it as a substitute of latex that goes in the middle of the carpet. So we were looking at every single raw material, and we were thinking, where can we scavenge waste from others that maybe they're not that clever to recycle these things themselves. And that's how you talk about industrial symbiosis and all these type of things. We were looking at every single raw material that we were using and how could we substitute. So also, there are now other examples like, using bio-based backings, using recycled materials from other sources. And we could get to around 60%. And now we have a plan, or they had a plan now to get it to 80%. Just scavenging waste which is out there. Sometimes it gets a little bit more expensive, sometimes it's a win-win. It depends. And now I moved for the last 3 months to a beverage can. So this is, we make cans for beer, for soft drinks, for any of those. And so it's about the recycling rate. How can we increase recycling rates, working with governments to increase the recycling on the cans. It's obviously made of a mono material, which is it's a huge advantage. It's not plastic and metal together. It's not different type of materials. Obviously that always helps. It's about weight reduction. We've reduced 35% of the weight in the last 15-20 years. Also about how to influence policy, and I think sometimes the industry has been slightly naive and has had bad policy because it is a packaging which is recyclable is not seen as a problem. Other packaging which have not been recyclable, somehow they have been the problem. But because this has a value, then when you implement recycling techniques, you go for the highest value. So sometimes, when talking about deposits, some countries, they put a bigger deposit on a can, which already had a residual value versus other type of packaging. And sometimes, we have been at a disadvantage. Whether for other packaging, because it was difficult to recycle in the first place, there is no effort into taking it back, because it's going to be incinerated anyway. So I think, Jack, thank you very much for your point. That is about, at the end of the day, is not about how you collect, and how do you devise, how you come up with ways of collecting more effectively. It's about what are the packaging that we want in the first place, what are the products we want in the first place, and looking at taxes for the differential taxes to really encourage the industry, because you can put a soft drink or a beer on different type of packaging. And also about consumer awareness, and there is a point around the standardization. In Spain, there is only one yellow container for packaging. That's quite easy. Even, and Spain is a federal sort of country where every region has their own ways of dealing with things. In the UK, every single local council has a different system. How? So even a different bag or a different color, or because it's council by council. Now, how can you communicate? How can you make an advertisement? How can you engage? How do you clever marketing to engage people in order to recycle, to put in the right bin? You cannot say you just put it on the yellow, as we say in Spain. And standardization of these things are great. I think Ian, you're going to talk about that a little bit. So this is, we've reduced quite a lot of weight, and I think this is important. And then it goes to the recycling rates. And obviously, in some countries, you say, oh, Brazil, they are so good. Well, of course, it's the metal values, let's say, is more valued than the labor in that country. So there are people already making money from picking the different aluminum cans. As Brazil goes up, the recycling rate is going to go down. So in poorer countries, people recycle valuable materials. That's just how it is. Now, how are we doing in Europe? So you have some countries, they have implemented different policies. You have good deposit schemes, you have good household collection schemes, you have really good technologies, and there are other countries where it's more tricky. I won't enter into this is a very complex subject. I won't enter into that. This something we discussed today is around measuring the real recycling and indicators. And for the last 20 years, we've been measuring really at collection. We collect, and then we send it somewhere, and then we count it at recycling. And that's the recycling rates. Is how in many countries in Europe still, and that's why it's great that the EU Commission and we've been lobbying fiercely to get the right method of the calculations for the real recycle just after sorting. Because most materials, or many materials, they count as recycle, and they are sent to incineration, and they send it to super downcycle. And I'd like to also make the point of, Jacqueline, you had a lot of R's, and a lot of R's on reuse, remanufacture, etc. But then we only had recycling. And there are many different ways of recycling. There is like-for-like recycling in terms of product to product, maintaining the same value. There is like-for-like recycling in terms of the material, but using it on a lesser function. And I call it, recycling, downcycling, crap cycling, energy recovery, and it's not a percentage. For PR, this percentage, you just want to have a percentage, and the countries compete on that percentage. The quality of the actual percentage is incredibly important. So these are, how some of the different aluminium packaging go. So you can have an incentive-based collection scheme, which gets very clean. You also can have separate collection systems like curbside collections. And then it's the technologies that you have in the sorting centers, is the issues around how the sorting centers are optimized. I'll give you an example. In Germany, 80 million people, they have a few sorting centers, but those sorting centers, they have the best technology because there are few. In France, you have 59 different provinces. They all want to have, for political reasons, they're local, and this whole thing about localism, it can also do a lot of damage to the circular economy. They want to have their local sorting center. Of course, they cannot afford the best technology to separate. So it has to be optimum. It's not about all localism. And I think some of these things, there are only 3 battery recyclers in Europe. We don't need to recycle everything, in every country. So I think it's important to really optimize what are those technologies. So for aluminum, it's quite, they are not quite clear, but I think it's important to really look at what is the optimum of the sorting centers in a given country. And you might, in a small country, maybe you focus on certain things, and other things, they do the adjacent country. So it's about, really understanding which battles you want to pick. I think I'll finish here, then we can take some questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much.